Hey guys, it's Tyler Brooke from FanDuel Insider. I have 3 picks for you for Week 11 that you should be putting into your FanDuel lineups this week. At quarterback, I'm a big fan of fading at the position, which is why I'm picking Derek Carr, a great value pick. He's on a hot streak in the past 4 games, going against a Detroit secondary that shut down Rodgers last week, but with Crabtree and Cooper on his side, Carr is bound to put up plenty of points. At running back, I'm a big fan of Charcandrick West, who has been stepping up in the absence of Jamal Charles. 20-plus carries each of the last 3 games. Bound to put up plenty of points against a Chargers defense that's allowed the most points to opposing running backs. And then on the other offense in that game, wide receiver Stevie Johnson. I'm a big fan of him as well. Keenan Allen's out for the year with Floyd and Gates both missing practice this week. That means plenty of targets for Johnson from Phillip Rivers. And let's not forget that Kansas City Chiefs secondary has led the second most points to opposing wide receivers. So there you have it. I'm Tyler Brooke from FanDuel Insider, and those are my picks. Best of luck setting your lineups this week.
Time for Indy Sports Central's Fantasy Focus. Tyler Brooke of FanDuel joining us now. Tyler, let's talk the Colts-Falcons game first, coming up this Sunday in Atlanta. The Falcons started off great this season. The Colts obviously are fighting for that #1 spot. Who do you see in this game provide some fantasy value this week? Who could be some big performers?
Oh, I think first you got to look at Atlanta. I think you got to look at Matt Ryan. Obviously, you got Vontae Davis on Julio Jones. He might have his hands full, but with Mike Adams out, there's an opportunity for a lot of big plays in the passing game for them. Other side of the ball, I'm looking at Frank Gore. I know they're taking him off his pitch count. And as long as this game's close, I think that Frank Gore should get enough carries to be valuable in fantasy.
It's probably not going to be 28 carries every week like he was just last week for the Colts, but could see a little bit more under Rob Chudzinski's offense. Let's talk about fantasy. Just take a step back for the entire fantasy realm now. We're starting to get close to the fantasy football playoffs if you're in a year-long league. Obviously, a lot of players have elevated teams to the top of their leagues. Who do you see some specific players who could provide an extra fantasy push down the stretch of the regular season to get some owners into the playoffs?
I think late in the season, running backs are key, and there's a couple right now. Todd Gurley, he started the season on a little slow to start because of the ACL injury, but he's killing it right now. He's got a couple tough run defenses coming up, but I think close to that playoff time, he'll really shine. Another running back, Charcandrick West for the Chiefs, with Jamal Charles out. He's had at least 20 carries past 3 games, getting a ton of production. And honestly, he's really their only weapon in the running game right now, so he's bound to get up points.
Now, I'll tell you who's helped me in my league is Langford from Chicago. He comes in, steps in for Matt Forte, but we'll see just how long Forte is out because he could be back sometime in the near future. What about this week specifically? We have some value plays maybe in weekly fantasy on FanDuel that could provide a special boost to their owners for this week.
I'm a big fan of a couple wide receivers. I'm looking at Stevie Johnson for the Chargers. Obviously, Keenan Allen's out for the year. Floyd and Gates have missed practice this week, so I think Johnson's bound to get a ton of targets. And then you got to look at Kansas City's secondary. Led the second most fantasy points, 2 wide receivers this season. Other wide receiver is Danny Amendola with Julian Edelman's injury. Tom Brady needs someone besides Gronk to throw to, and I think Amendola is going to get a lot of targets as well.
Of course, in our Indy Sports Central Fantasy League, we're starting to get close to the end of the regular season. There's a huge matchup this week between myself and Lara Overton, number 4 against number 2 in the league. I'm number 4, she is number 2. Tyler, when you look at these lineups, what do you see?
This is going to be a close one. I think you're going to have to rely a lot on Carr and Cooper. They're going to need a big day.
I'm hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about Amendola a little bit. Lara's got a little bit of a tough one. I think Lamar Miller and Justin Forsett, those are two guys that really need to have big games for her, especially Forsett against that Rams front 7. If Forsett can't step up, you might have a chance at winning.
You mentioned running backs are really important this time of year. So my running backs are running backs. Who's it going to be? We'll see you on Sunday, Lara, exactly what happens. That's Tyler Brooke from FanDuel talking Fantasy Focus here on Indy Sports Central's Football Friday Night. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Tyler Brooke from FanDuel Insider. Here are 3 players you need to look for in Week 3. At quarterback, if you don't want to spend the money, I'm looking at Arizona Cardinals quarterback Carson Palmer. 10 months off of ACL surgery. He's really throwing the ball well. He's established his connection with Larry Fitzgerald. John Brown's still in the mix. I think he's a great value pick. At running back, yes, I know he's a Patriots player, but you got to look at Dion Lewis. He might have fumbled the past 2 weeks, but not only does he pick up yards on the ground, he also picks up catches in the passing game. At wide receiver, I think you got to look at Ty Montgomery, Green Bay Packers. Devontae Adams' status is uncertain for Monday night against the Kansas City Chiefs. I expect him to get a lot of touches, especially after impressing Aaron Rodgers on Sunday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks. For FanDuel Insider, I'm Tyler Brooke. Best of luck in Week 3.
Time now for Fantasy Focus with Indy Sports Central. We're talking to FanDuel's Tyler Brooke. Tyler, thanks for joining us. At this point of the fantasy season, one game, your star performer doesn't perform, it's okay. 2 games, you're starting to get a little bit nervous. So I want to break down a couple guys who are top flight players who haven't done so far. We'll start with, right here in Indianapolis, quarterback Andrew Luck. Reason to be concerned, or he'll be okay?
Well, I think there's a little bit of reason concern, but you got to look at the defenses he was playing the past 2 weeks. Great defensive lines, solid secondaries. You know, he's going to struggle naturally against those teams. I think he's got a couple good bounce-back weeks next couple weeks. He's playing the Titans, playing the Jaguars. I don't think there's too much reason concern. If you're not starting Andrew Luck in your fantasy league, I don't know what you're doing.
What about wide receiver Brandon Cooks of New Orleans? Hasn't been a top bill receiver that many thought he could be.
Yeah, this one's concerned me actually a little bit. He was supposed to show a lot of promise last year, got hurt. You know, Drew Brees, now with his shoulder injury, who knows how long he's going to be out. This is a guy I think you start to worry about. I think you got to look at the matchups. Don't know if you started him this week, honestly.
Running back C.J. Anderson of Denver had a great last half of the season, hasn't shown it yet this year.
This is another tough one. Struggled the past couple weeks. The offensive line, Denver's looks shaky. Peyton's been getting beat up like nothing else. So, and if he keeps splitting carries with Ronnie Hillman, you might have to look elsewhere. I think there's a couple really good options on the waiver wire if there's a lot of guys available. And, you know, with running back, that position changes a lot throughout the season.
How about tight end Greg Olsen of the Carolina Panthers? When Kelvin Benjamin went out preseason, many people thought he'd see a lot more looks. Hasn't come his way.
Yeah, that's been strange to me. I mean, he's obviously the red zone target, but Cam Newton doesn't have an offensive line there, and it's obviously affected their passing game. I don't know if you give up on them yet. There's not a lot of great top-tier tight ends out there. They're all obviously available. Gronk, Kelsey, those guys are already taken. So I think you got to keep starting them and just hope for the best.
Well, the beautiful thing about FanDuel is it's weekly fantasy.
Absolutely.
So if you pick one bad player one week, well, next week you get a completely new lineup. How about some sleepers that you have in mind for this week's games?
I'm looking at a couple guys. I'm looking at Ty Montgomery of the Green Bay Packers. I know that's an odd one, but Devontae Adams, shaky. He might play on Monday night, but, I mean, even if he does, he's probably going to be a decoy. Ty Montgomery looked really good last week against the Seahawks. Aaron Rodgers was praising him. I think he's going to get a few more touches this week. I obviously like David Johnson in Arizona. Andre Ellington's still out, and he's going to get a lot of touches. Bruce Arians said he wants to start ramping those up. And another good note, both of those guys, kick returners. So there's always that threat for those return touchdowns.
Matchup for Ty Montgomery, too. Kansas City has given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers so far through weeks 1 and 2 this year. That's Tyler Brooke of FanDuel. This is Indy Sports Central Fantasy Focus. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, it's Tyler Brooke from FanDuel Insider. Here are 3 players I think you should be putting in your FanDuel lineups this week. At quarterback, I know Joe Flacco and Carson Palmer are some popular options, but I'm going with Marcus Mariota against the Dolphins. That's a weak defense that's going through a lot of change this year, and Mariota, who might have had 0 touchdowns last week, should have 3 or 4 this week. At running back, I'm a big fan of Giovanni Bernard. Yes, the Bills' defense is tough, but Jeremy Hill's been struggling. Bernard's the clear #1 option. I expect him to get points on the ground and through the air. At wide receiver, I love Eric Decker this week. Brandon Marshall's going to get covered by D'Angelo Hall. The rest of the Redskins secondary, very questionable. Decker will get plenty of looks, plenty of targets. He's had a touchdown every game he's played this year, and I expect that to continue this week. I'm Tyler Brooke from FanDuel Insider, and those are my picks. Best of luck this week.
Checking in on the FOX59 Red Couch for Indy Sports Central's Fantasy Focus. I'm Dave Griffiths alongside Tyler Brooke of FanDuel. Tyler, let's talk about the Colts matchup this weekend. Down in Miami, sunny South Beach, taking on the Dolphins. What do you see in terms of fantasy matchups for this game?
Well, unfortunately, I think that Colts run defense is going to have some trouble with Lamar Miller. Guy's been running all over some defenses. On the other side of the ball, I think you're going to have to stay away from some Colts players, unfortunately, with Matt Hasselbeck questionable. Andrew Luck doesn't look like he's playing. You might just have to steer away from the offense completely.
When it comes to a game like this, when there's so many injuries you have to watch out for, this is something that even when it comes to game day, the best fantasy players are looking at those injury reports right up until game time, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something you have to do, especially with FanDuel. When your lineup's locked, you got to make sure you check those inactive lists. An hour and a half before game time, especially in the 1 p.m. games, that's when you get the inactive list. If you don't see a guy on that inactive list, that means he will be playing. So it's always something to check on.
Oh, when we're looking around the league now, it is week 16 of the NFL season, just 2 left to go before the playoffs begin. When you look around the league, what value picks do you see this week? Obviously with FanDuel, it resets every week, so what do you think could be beneficial to some people's lineups.
I mean, you always got to look at whoever's playing the Saints secondary. This week, that's Blake Bortles, who surprisingly the past few weeks has been doing great. Over 20 points past few games. I think he has a great matchup. I think after Sunday night's game, David Johnson, 3 touchdowns. They seem to be working him a lot more. They were a little hesitant about giving him carries earlier in the season, but they seem to want him as a workhorse now.
When you look at the Jaguars specifically, they're a team that the Colts are going to have to pay attention to, obviously, for the next decade now. It seems like they have a really young roster on that offensive side of the ball that is dangerous.
Tons of playmakers. I mean, you have Bortles, then you have the 2 Allens, Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson. These 2 guys are great. Allen Robinson catches the ball at the high point, which is something you always like to see in the red zone. And then even in the backfield, TJ Yeldon, he's been hurt a lot this year, but a lot of potential there.
Well, in our Indy Sports Central Fantasy Football League, we are on to the championship matchup. It is between John Dissauer, our weekend weather for CBS4, and also our Indy Sports Central staff team put together by the guys behind the scenes. Tyler, when you look at this matchup, the championship matchup for all the marbles, what do you see?
Very bold move putting 2 tight ends in there with Jordan Reed and Gronkowski, but honestly, if those are your 2 tight ends, I can see why you're doing it. The staff team looks real dangerous this week, but then you have to look at Dissauer's wide receivers, Antonio Brown, Brandon Marshall. These are 2 guys, big playmakers. Only thing I'm worried about with his lineup, Hightower and Barnidge. It seems like with the Browns offense, only one of those guys, if one, is going to have a big night.
Looking at that staff team specifically, you see a couple of those mid-season additions that were just so important.
Yeah.
Doug Baldwin has been on fire recently.
He's been absolutely on fire. I think big reason for that is Jimmy Graham being hurt. Seems within the passing game they have no one else to really throw to, and Baldwin seemed to step up in a big way.
That is Tyler Brooke of FanDuel checking in with us on Indy Sports Central's Fantasy Focus. We'll be right back.
Happy holidays, everyone. I'm Tyler Brooke from FanDuel Insider, here giving you 3 picks for this NFL weekend. At quarterback, I'm a big fan of Blake Bortles, who's been on fire as of late, going against a historically bad Saints secondary. With Allen Hurns and Allen Robinson at wide receiver, not to mention Julius Thomas at tight end, big fan of Bortles this week. At running back, David Johnson's coming off a 3-touchdown performance against Philadelphia, and this week he's going against an incredibly inconsistent Green Bay defense that struggled against the ground game. Finally, at wide receiver, Sammy Watkins going against the Dallas Cowboys. Past 4 games, caught 6 touchdown passes. He's been the vertical threat for Tyrod Taylor. I expect that to continue this week. I'm Tyler Brooke from FanDuel Insider, and those are my 3 picks. Have a happy holiday.